Welcome to the cityCURRENT Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. Our mission at cityCURRENT is to power the good, and we do that through positive media, events, and philanthropy. This show features interviews with a mix of business and community leaders who discuss important efforts, trends, lessons learned, and ways to get involved so we can learn more about our community and work together to make a difference. Now, on to the show. Welcome to the cityCURRENT Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. We also, too, love filling your cup full of amazing wisdom and expertise. We're here with our good friend. He's a best-selling author. He's a public speaker. He has spoken at our cityCURRENT events. He is resilience researcher, Adam Markel, and his latest book coming up is ChangeProof, Leveraging the Power of Uncertainty to Build Long-Term Resilience. You can see him holding it up. He's got it on his shirt as well. He's also the best-selling author of the book Pivot, The Art and Science of Reinventing Your Career and Life. I could go on and on. He's a CEO. We'll talk all about that stuff too. But Adam, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm great, man. I was thinking as you were, giving me that introduction that I should be the founder of the speaking T-shirt. I feel like that's every time I'm with you, I have a T-shirt that's got a message. So the speaking T is, maybe we'll rebrand me just a little bit that way. It'll be fun.
Hey, it's always good to have the branding and to wear the brand. That's for sure. So
yes,
let's start out because on your end, you have a really cool story that you shared when you spoke at cityCURRENT at our event. And it starts with you being a lifeguard and really sharing some powerful lessons there. But then you go on and you become an attorney and a really successful career on the business side. But you parlay that over and really have stepped into this amazing space around resiliency and writing these bestsellers. And so give us a little bit in short form of your backstory, and then we'll talk all about this new book, ChangeProof.
Sure. Jeremy, the pivotal point, and I'm going to use that term sort of a tongue-in-cheek way because I wrote a book called Pivot. That was sort of my entry into this idea space, which I absolutely love. And that was a reinvention out of the practice of law. I was an 18-year veteran in the legal profession. And much of the time when I would start the day, I wasn't happy. I was angry. For a period of years, I would begin the day in anxiety. And I don't know if people can relate to that right now, but I think so. I think there's a lot of people feeling anxious about a lot of things. And ultimately, this anxiety culminated in a Saturday morning trip, an unexpected, unplanned trip to the emergency room. Instead of being at my son's baseball game, I'm lying on a gurney with electrodes stuck to my chest. And I'm thinking, legit thinking I'm never going to see my kids again. I don't know if you've ever had like a moment of scare where you think that you're going to lose literally everything. And to me, everything was my kids, was my wife and my kids and, houses, cars and all that crap just didn't matter in that moment. But the doctor eventually made it in and said, hey, your heart, EKG wise and all that, your heart's fine, but you're having a panic attack. And I'm like, what? He goes, you're having an anxiety attack. And that's what is showing up. And that was freaky, Jeremy, because I didn't, I was a lawyer, I was a litigation attorney, like a paid warrior and all that kind of thing. And so I felt a lot of shame around it. I didn't tell anybody. My wife was right there with me. I felt so horrible that I'd put her through that moment where we were both just, kind of thinking the worst. And ultimately, to condense a really long period in my life, which was about 2.5 years down to a couple of seconds here, I wrote this book that was tracking my transition through the different phases of, recognize getting this bit of a diagnosis, I suppose, that my life was on track to kind of hit a wall and doing something about it. Or at least starting to do something about it and, trying and failing. Ultimately, after about 2.5 years, I reinvented my career path. And in the process of telling people about what I was doing and what I had done, folks said, hey, this is something you got to share with other people. In fact, my oldest daughter said to me, Dad, you got to write a book about it. So that was the first book, Pivot. And that launched this journey that I've been on for about 12 years now. That has been an epic and wonderful ride, but filled with uncertainty. When I was a lawyer, there was a lot more certainty because it just kind of knew through the good and the bad, the ugly of life and everything else. The world needs people to, settle disputes and get contracts signed, all that kind of good stuff. So it was a very steady, sort of predictable profession in many ways. And I went into a space with no predictability and everything's uncertain, which is just what we're living through right now. And along this path of writing this book and speaking around the globe, I discovered that the one thing that was most important to the success that I was able to recreate in a new arena and a new profession was resilience. That my resiliency and what it meant to be resilient for me was what made it possible to be around to ideate something new and successful. And then I got fascinated about what does resiliency even mean? What does it look like? How do people think about it or define it? And that's when I started doing the research on it. And so it's been several years now of researching. We've got several thousand leaders, senior leaders and mid-level leaders in organizations all over the globe. Very successful Fortune 50 to startup organizations. And so we've now learned a lot about what resiliency is and what it's not, and how it is that it contributed to me being able to do what I've done, and where it's fallen off and where I've had challenges because I wasn't taking care of business, the kind of business that leads to growth. And so that's what takes me here. And
well, and I also want to point out, you're also the CEO of More Love Media and host of the Conscious Pivot podcast. And so when you're talking about having access to all these individuals and doing all this research, you have a very wide net that you cast to be able to pull all this information in. And when you talk about pivot and your public speaking, I mean, you've helped so many personally and professionally. And I'm even thinking, as you were talking about, just a lot of the tips that you shared that I still keep to this day in terms of recharging. And, when you wake up, there's a certain energy and routine, and there's a lot of stuff that I don't want to, kind of take away all your thunder on, but there's a lot of really powerful tips and bits of advice that you share as a part of that I cherish to this day. Talk about what led you, though, when you talk about ChangeProof. Obviously, as you mentioned, we as humans, we want certainty. We like structure. We like things to be predictable. We're living in an era that, is anything but. And so perfect timing on ChangeProof. But what led you to write this book, and who is it geared toward?
So let me start with the last question. I was led to write this book because we had accumulated this research, and yes, through public speaking, I've been able to get the word out about a lot of it to a lot of folks, but the authorship space has been one I've been in love with. I love to write. I love that process, even though it's excruciating. And so this book, ChangeProof, was the way that we could take what we've now learned about resilience and bring it to people in business settings. Mostly, I think that the audience is mostly an entrepreneur or a business operator or owner. And we think that's, and in part, the reason for that, not that it's not for individuals who are not in that space, it's that this is where we thought we could throw the biggest pebble into the pond to have the biggest ripple effect. Because ultimately, people spend the bulk of their lives working, or either working in someone else's organization or working for themselves. And if you're not resilient in that space, if you don't understand how it is that you can be at your best consistently and have longevity to continually raise your level of capacity, then you're not really able to serve as many people as possible. That's what I love about you, Jeremy, is that your reinvention story, which we've talked about in the past, is remarkable. And the work that you do today, you have a big ripple effect. You've impacted a lot of people, and in part, it's because you do work directly with people who are themselves leading others. So that's where I think the impact can be exponential. ChangeProof, it's a simple premise in the book that we use a lot of stories and, again, a lot of research. So it's not a dry book. It's even though it's research based, I think it's really, if I'm touting it myself, I guess, I think it's a really literary book. It has literary quality to it. And yet it also has all these tangible takeaways for people to simply operationalize and maybe even ingrain, create systems so that the culture of their organization is one that helps people to be at their best, and where the feeling on the part of the employee is that the employer, the organization, has their back, and that got your back environment is one that contributes to the resiliency of the people that work there. And obviously we're living through a great resignation, and we're hearing this all the time. And my feeling is that when you are helping to operationalize resiliency within the organization and culturizing it at a deep level, you're going to see that stop. You're going to see people not need to leave to find themselves, and you're going to see people that want to be a part of that, so it'll attract new talent. And I think as well, it's going to bring back talent, meaning people have left, and those people haven't burned a bridge. They just didn't feel like it was the path for them in the moment. They were searching for something and wanted to feel better, et cetera. But I think people will come back, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all have to sometimes foray out and see what's what. And then, if it's part of the, what serves us, we can come back as well. And I think so you're going to see that as an unexpected little treat over the next couple of years, if organizations get the message. We have to learn, and a great resignation is such a learning opportunity, don't you think, Jeremy? I mean, such a learning opportunity for the people who are running and leading organizations. So,
well, I feel like a lot of this is leadership. When you talk about people, they go to work for a company, but ultimately it's for the leaders and for the people. And then that's also why they leave, is the leadership and the people and the relationships. And so when you talk about becoming change-proof, so much of that is about leadership that's going to attract and retain, or it's going to, push people away if the people, are not change-proof as an organization, but as individuals, as leaders. And so what was something that, as you're synthesizing the information and the research, what's something that you learned going through the process of writing the book that has helped you become more change-proof?
That's a great question. Well, often you write a book, and this is an interesting thing about it. You begin to see the things that you're writing about showing up in your own life. So you got to be careful what you write about sometimes, it's interesting. So for me, the process of pause, ask, choose, the pause, ask, choose paradigm, which is the one that's introduced in ChangeProof, became so evident in my own life that I was reactive. I was angry a lot. I'm kind of a recovering angeraholic. 18 years in the law gave me a lot of access, from my anger. But the pause, the getting myself to a place of neutralness, so that I could reset and then be able to ask questions in a way that empowered me to get powerful answers, more powerful answers than I had been getting previously in making my decisions quickly or reactively, or, from my gut in the moment. That was that kind of my brand of leadership. And it was arrogant, and it was egotistical. And I needed to get a good dose of humility, which I've had plenty of in my life, but I needed more of it, I think, just to understand how powerful the pause is. So the power of the pause, followed by these questions that are just such a phenomenal process to learn how to properly ask questions. Because the thing about questions, and this is more of a philosophy or a theory of mine, I can't sort of prove it, but I think questions and answers are like cause and effect. You cannot have a question and not have an answer. You cannot have an answer that did not get preceded by a question. The only thing I can't predict, of course, is the timing. You ask big questions, you're looking for big answers, but it doesn't mean you're going to get a big answer 10 seconds later. Sometimes you get an answer right away, which is really, almost like miraculous, of course. But sometimes it takes a while. So there's a need for a certain amount of patience as well, which, as a parent of 4, and you're a daddy too, you learn patience along the way with that. So the pausing, the asking, and then ultimately choosing. And the choice becomes action. We know that action is so vitally important. And sometimes inaction can be just as powerful. Sometimes we have to slow down to speed up. And I think that's, evident in so many different areas of life, and just, it becomes commonsensical when you see how powerful slowing down can be. So in that slowing down, if you do get to the place where you've paused, you've asked, and now you have a choice whether to slow down. It's like, well, what are you slowing down to do? If you're not going to take an action and speed up, What are you slowing down to do? And this is where our research about resilience comes in. You're slowing down so that you can recharge. Like you said earlier, you can refill the tank. I love watching Formula One racing, and my son and I do this together. It's just on Netflix. They have those, I think, 3 seasons of it. It's pretty wild. 72 or 73 laps in a typical F1 race. And yet you see that routinely these cars have to take a pit stop. Now, what's amazing about that pit stop, they slow down completely to a stop. And then 3 seconds later, they're shot out like a cannon, right? But in the meantime, they changed 4 tires, they filled the tank with gas and all that kind of thing. And I think that's a really powerful analogy for what's not working in corporate America that has led to the Great Resignation. People are riding around in many ways trying to finish that race, kind of thinking there's an end to the race, which is a misnomer to begin with. This is the race that never ends, right? So it's not like we're getting to a point where we're done. So they're driving around and they don't take very many breaks, and they're like driving on these worn tires. They're exhausted. They're near burnout. And those tires are getting more and more bald. And the thing in F1 is that you're penalized if you don't take a pit stop. They'll penalize you seconds, which will cost you the race if you think you can somehow drive straight through and not take a pit, because they understand that you driving around that track on bald tires, not only the performance isn't going to be there, there's no way that you can truly compete, but you're also dangerous. You are dangerous to yourself, and you're dangerous to everybody else that's on that track. And I think that's the message when I speak with CEOs or other senior level leaders, is that, you want to crush it. And a lot of companies, despite everything, are crushing it right now. You just don't want to crush your people as you're crushing it. So you have to have those pit stops. And then people will say to me, well, but, I can't just give somebody, unlimited PTO, or, tell them, hey, listen, take to every other day you shouldn't work, to take care of yourself, kind of thing. And that's not, that's not our answer either. The F1 is a great example, because all you really truly need, and that's what this book talks about, is how you can toggle back and forth like a light switch between on and off, between, really important focus and energy for certain tasks or certain things, and then the kind of rest, the kind of recovery rituals, resilience rituals that enable you to recharge so that you're at top performance again and again and again and again, without getting burned out, without being exhausted. And I think that's, when employees know that the people that are looking out for them are truly not just looking over them, but are looking out for them, we have something, we've shifted something important.
Yeah. Great advice and great analogy. I love the tie-in there, especially with the pit stop and how important that is. And like you said, it's not just for the safety of the driver, it's the safety for everyone. And so putting on kind of your public speaker hat, if you will, what's one other thing that you want people to take away, a good teaser, if you will, for the book? So what's another tip or recommendation? What's something you want people to take away from ChangeProof?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think the book is out 2/22/22, which is just a fun thing, in February here coming up. It really is a book for leaders. It's a book, and that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But to me, you've got to be modeling as a leader. Like as a parent, we have 4 kids, and I don't know about you in your house, but our kids never listen to us very much. They certainly don't listen to me much, but they watch, man. They watch everything we do to see whether there's congruency, because where there's a lack of congruency or there's hypocrisy even, they just disconnect. They don't listen. So, for a leader to say, hey, I want my people to take care of themselves. I want them to, be able to go the extra mile, but not at a cost of, it making, putting them in the ditch, or, they run out of gas or whatever it is. But if that leader is the one that's not taking care of themselves, if they can't help that other person to see how it is that you do operationalize this toggling technique between your energy zone and your recovery zone, well, then what good is it? Because they're not seeing the example of it. So there's a disconnect. There's this incongruence and even hypocrisy sometimes, and that's not going to work. So I think that's a really important takeaway from this book, is that it will help you to help others. And I know so many people really want to do that. And I also think, getting an assessment, really finding out how, at what level you are resilient now, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, because that's the way we chunk it down into those 4 zones of resilience: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, to just check in and see where you're at, and be assessed to know, hey, this is what, what the real is. And I'll give you one little piece of this. Question 13, it's a 16 question assessment that we use. It takes about 3 minutes for people to take it. Question 13 asks the question, are you engaged in a livelihood that's in line with your core values and beliefs? And across 3,000 plus assessments, we found that routinely that area is green. It's always over 80% that people say yes to that. Very fascinating. You go, okay, well, geez, Louise, why is there a great resignation at all if that's the case, right? Well, it's question 14. Right after that, we say, there are significant gaps between what you say is important to you and how you actually allocate your time and energy. And that disconnect, and that answer is always red. Like 90% of the time, that area is in the 50s, red. And that's the reason. That's the disconnect that I think has driven people out to find some answers that they haven't been able to find in the situation, the work situation they find themselves in.
Yeah. And it goes back to your comment about congruency, is finding congruency, creating congruency. You have a free opportunity for people to do an assessment. So mention the online assessment opportunity.
It's simple, resiliencerank.com, resiliencerank.com. You can also at adammarkel.com, scroll down below the fold on the first page and you'll see it right there. It's super simple. It takes 3 minutes and it's just our gift. It's a way for you to see where it is in 16 short questions, 3 minutes most. You'll get to see mentally, emotionally, physically, even spiritually, how you doing? and most importantly, what you can do about it.
Where do we go to pre-order and ultimately purchase the book?
Way cool. Well, changeproof.com is the pre-order page, and it's simple there. And for me, just I thrive in live environments. I love what we're doing right now because it's something that's just organic. And so keynote speaking is something I adore doing, and I do it virtually and do it in person. So adammarkel.com, you find everything there. We have a kind of a movie trailer demo reel that starts off on the first page that references that story. I gave a TED Talk some years ago where I pick up this old lifeguard whistle and I tell a story about something that happened at the beach. If you're curious about that, you can check that out. But we absolutely just love the opportunity to share this information with folks. I'm a resilience guy, and more recently, I just realized I'm an idea guy. I love to share ideas, and that's one last parting idea is I've been thinking about a lot lately in relation to ChangeProof is that we've got to learn from the future, and I'm already into the next book, which is a book about imagination. We're going to start that up in the spring, but it's like, well, how do we learn from the future? That's an interesting question. And what do we learn? What do we learn from the future? So I'm going to share one thing that I believe I've learned from the future. The future, as I've examined it, has always taught me one thing. And that is that everything that's happening in the present is going to contribute to my growth. I look back at any point in my life, if I look at what I worried about, what I obsessed about, what was giving me anxiety or what uncertainty existed, I look back on that and I know right now that the thing that was evident at that time was that I was going to learn, that the future tells me that was a growth opportunity for me. And because of that, I realized that it was net positive. But I, in the moment, might have saw it as net negative. I was, all caught up in my stuff about it. And I think a lot of people are living in fear right now. And so, maybe this is a little motivational, but I'll just say it anyway. Wherever you're at in your life at this moment, realize that it's probably net positive. You just aren't going to know that for another few years or maybe even longer. But the fact is it's net positive. And if you can realize that in the moment, you've learned something about the future that changes the way you approach what opportunities are out there for you right this moment.
Wrap up with how you wake up every morning.
So I told the story just briefly about waking up with my feet on the floor and feeling anxiety and ultimately having an anxiety attack. But shortly after that trip to the hospital, I was having trouble sleeping one night and I watched this movie, Jerry Maguire, that we probably have all seen. It's got those great lines like, show me the money and you complete me and all that stuff. But at a point in the movie, Jerry introduces us to his mentor, Dickie Fox, this older guy, in a seersucker suit in this corny old office. And he says these words to Jerry. He goes, in truth, I've failed as much as I've succeeded, but I love my wife and I love my life. And I wish you my kind of success. And one night when I couldn't sleep, I watched that movie. And as soon as those words were spoken, I turned the TV off and I went to bed, even because I knew the end of the movie. And I knew I could sleep that night. And I did. I slept really well that night. And the next morning I woke up, put my feet on the floor, and I was expecting to kind of feel that old shudder. But instead, when my feet hit the floor, like inexplicably, I couldn't even catch it before it happened. I said out of my mouth, I love my life. And for every single day for the last 12 years, I wake up, put my feet on the floor, I say, I love my life. And what that means for me, among other things, is that I'm thankful for my life. I appreciate my life. And that's the good, the bad, the ugly, like to love your life no matter what, I think is a gift to you. It's a gift to everyone around you. And it is a blessing in so many ways. And I also feel like it's me saying thank you. Thank you to the source of all creation. And I feel in that moment a connection that is deep. It's a great way to begin the day. Like my mom used to say to me all the time, just start the day on the right foot. And that's how I do it now.
Adam, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Thank you for watching the City Current Show, which is produced by City Current with funding provided by Lipscomb & Pitts Insurance, a Higginbotham company. To learn more about each of the guests, to share your stories of others, leading by example, or to watch past episodes and more media focused on good news, visit our website at citycurrent.com or follow along on social media using the handle or hashtag CityCurrent. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and thank you for all you do to power the good.